poignant verse. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him. So he did.
I'm not sure if I'm up there. That was beautiful music. Whew. Really was, wasn't it? Thank you so much. I'm so glad Pam and Russ are here this morning and their friends. Thank you for coming. That was really good music. I was so blessed by it. Those ladies, yeah, you guys, very talented. It's hard to follow, to be honest. What am I going to do now, right? I can sing too. Thanks. So I'm so happy to be here this morning with my church, Santa Cruz Church, my favorite church. I go to a lot of churches, but Santa Cruz is my favorite church. And so let me tell you what happened last weekend, last Sabbath. I was going to come to church. I promised I was going to come to church. But, so we got up in the morning, and our dear, dear, dear friend Maxie, our dog, was very sick in the morning. I mean, we just woke up, and she wasn't, like, eating. She wasn't getting up. She wasn't, usually, you know, we get up in the morning, she's up, you know, 'cause she's hungry all the time, so she's, you know, walking around the kitchen, and she just wasn't moving. And she was kind of, like, shaking a little bit. I mean, it's just totally abnormal. So we took her right to the vet that Sabbath morning, and but they couldn't find anything like really bad with her. She had a fever, so they gave her some antibiotics, and she had this problem with her back, so they gave her some cortisone, and then we went home and kind of hoped for the best. But Paul and I were really, really distressed because we were thinking we might have to put her down. We were just crying. It was a sad day. And we got home and kind of hoped for the best. We gave her medicines. I got home right in time to watch the sermon online. So I was with you in spirit, so I just wanted to let you know that. But I have a praise report for our dog. You know, it's funny how sometimes, you know, things work out. She did get better. Her fever went away with the antibiotics. A couple of days she was feeling better, and she got up. I mean, she's 14 and a half years old, golden retriever. So they usually live from 10 to 12, so she's kind of past her life expectancy. So we were really thinking, you know, this is it for her. But, you know, she got up, you know, like the third day, and she started walking, and now it's like nothing happened. So praise God for that. She's an elderly lady, you know, and she's still around, and we just love her so much. By the way, I adopted her from Ivor and Tante Myers. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They couldn't keep her when she was still a puppy, so I took her from them, and I've just loved her ever since. You know, she's just a sweet, 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 sweet dog. But anyway, I was watching online last week, and Pastor Tom preached, and I'm like, oh no, he's going to preach what I was going to preach. Have you ever had that happen to you? He's like, oh no, oh. But then, you know, I watched, and I realized, okay, no, it's okay, it's okay. It's complementary. It's not the same thing. He talked, you know, those of you who were here, he talked about all these things that were happening, you know, and it was mentioned earlier today during prayer. All these things that have happened this year, all these hurricanes and earthquake, fires, shootings. I mean, just on it. It seems like it's been nonstop this year. I don't know how you felt, but it's almost like it gives you fatigue of all these things in the news. Like you turn on the news, you just like, oh no, what's going to happen today, kind of thing. So that's what he talked about, and it's kind of complementary with what I'm gonna, you know, what I was planning to talk about, which is how do we prepare for what's coming, but also how do we prepare for just emergencies, you know, because for instance, the earthquake that happened in Mexico, that really kind of shook me up. I've been in earthquakes before. I've been to, you know, like a big earthquake, 7.5 in Santiago, and that was the same year that Mexico City had their really, really big earthquake. And it was about the same. Maybe the earthquake in Mexico was not as strong even, but it's just that Mexico City is built on this dry lake. So any little movement causes all these, constructions. And I remember watching on Facebook some videos about how to be prepared for an earthquake. And I'm thinking, we live in California. This is earthquake country, and we are due big time. This is what the experts are saying. Like the possibilities of a big earthquake happening in the next 30 years, which is a long time, but still, it's like 100%. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. It could be today. It could be tomorrow. It could be 5 years from today. We just don't know. And so they were saying, well, what do you do to prepare for an earthquake? And so Paul has been rolling his eyes ever since, because I've been, buying these backpacks, and I've been putting, toilet paper and, granola bars and things like that, and, bought these knives, and I bought these things to start fires. And I've been putting all these emergency things, because I watched these videos online. In fact, one of them was a Mexican video, like how to be ready for an earthquake. I'm thinking, we are not ready. What would happen if we had a big earthquake here? It's totally, I'd say a possibility. It's something that we need to be thinking of. So emergency preparedness is one thing, but also we know, as we have been talking about, is that these things will probably continue to go on. Emergencies or calamities like these will probably continue to happen. Are we ready for a future where things are more and more frequent? Things like these are more and more frequent. Another thing that shook me up last year was that in the winter of last year, I don't know if you remember, it was like January or February, but we had this big winter storm come through this area. It was really bad in the Salinas, Prunedale area where I live now, because there were like 75-mile-an-hour winds. I don't know if you remember that. It was really, really strong over there, especially this is Salinas. There were like 700 trees that fell in the Salinas, Prunedale area that day. And it's so funny because I was at the gym totally oblivious. I didn't know what was happening outside, all these strong winds. I had no idea. I got home, and I see like this part of not the roof, but like a metal awning almost that we had at home, just flew out. It was just on the deck, all these parts. And then a tree was down, and part of our fence, that divides our neighbor's property from our, all these things were like, I'm like, what happened? I had no idea. Then I found out, it was a pretty strong winter storm that happened. Well, we were out of power for 5.5 days. And I was talking to some of our neighbors. Some of our neighbors have lived in that area for like 20 or 30 years. They remember the 89 earthquake. And the 89 earthquake, they weren't out of power for that long, maybe like 3 days at the most. So this was even more. And of course, when you don't have power, we have a shared well in our community. So it's about 16 homes that share this well. And without power, there's no pump, right? Luckily, we have this emergency, tank that just kind of saves the water. So, but they told us to conserve water because we didn't know when the people were going to be able to restore, our power. We just didn't know. So they told us conserve water, don't take showers. So here we are, 5 days, no shower. Luckily, I have an aunt that lives like 5 miles away. I went to take a shower there, and my daughter took a shower at MBA, Paul took a shower at work. We were able to survive without showers, right? But that was 5.5 days. By the second or third day, we're like, we need a generator. Everybody around here has generators. We don't have a generator. So here we are calling all the Home Depots, Lowe's. No, nobody had generators. They were sold out. So by some miracle, Paul called the Home Depot in Morgan Hill, was it? Gilroy. Well, one of those, and they had returned 2 generators that morning, and we're like, there. We were right there. We got the generator. And it's funny because someone else, I was commenting this on Facebook, and someone else said, I must have bought the other one. Because they bought that generator that same day at the same Home Depot. So anyway, we had a generator for like the next 3 days. We had lights a little bit. We were able to turn on our computers and our phones and our fridge. We had to switch things on and off because you couldn't power the whole house. But it was an experience to be 5.5 days without power. I don't know how many of you have been through a period of time like that, without any of the amenities that we are so used to. We are so dependent on all these things, that to me, that was another eye-opener. But also, let me tell you what, that day that the wind came, it was a Friday, I remember, because I was supposed to be in Anaheim that night and give a presentation at Anaheim Spanish Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I was taking a flight out of Monterey Airport, and I was running out of gas. So I'm like, I need to put gas. So I went to the nearest gas station. We had 3 gas stations in Prunedale. There's no gas stations open. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the next nearest place to put gas, which is Salinas, only 10 miles away. I'm really running out here. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Salinas, go to the first gas station. It was open, but there was a huge line. Well, by the time I got to the pump, they cut it off. I was like, you got to be kidding. I got to put gas. Oh, you got to go downtown and see if you find something. So I was driving downtown. Everywhere in Salinas, I mean, I drove by at least 15 gas stations. Everything was closed, shut down, no gas. And I'm running out of gas. I need to be at the airport by 2 p.m. It's like 11. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I finally just prayed. It was raining so hard that day also. I remember that. I was, okay, Lord, I'm supposed to be in Anaheim tonight. I'm doing this for you. So if you want me to go, help me find basically a gas station. And if you don't want me to go, that's fine too. I'll just stay here until Paul can pick me up tonight sometime. Whatever. So I was just giving it to the Lord. And I'd finished praying, and I'm here driving a couple of more blocks. I see a light. It was a gas station. And I go put gas, and the only gas station open in the whole town of Salinas. Go figure that. So the point of this is we were without power, without water. You know, we had just some reserve water, but without possibly water, gas, or power for 5.5 days. We were not prepared for that. Are we prepared for things like this in our lives? And of course, I think exhibit A of this year has been Puerto Rico. I have an uncle who lives in Puerto Rico, my dad's brother, and have 2 cousins that live here in the States, and they were able to bring him over. As soon as a flight was available, they brought them over because the situation in Puerto Rico is kind of dire. It's been like 6 weeks, but it's still pretty bad. In fact, I have another friend who is from the Santa Clara Seventh-day Adventist Church in San Jose, and her son and a couple of more young people from that church actually go to school at the Seventh-day Adventist University in Puerto Rico. And when that happened, she brought her son over as soon as she could. And he was here for a couple of days and thinking, okay, I'm going to go back and finish my school year. So he went back, like after like a week or whatever. And then he had to come back like 2 weeks later. He's like, Mom, I cannot do this. The situation here is really bad. I just can't do it. There's just no power, no air conditioning. At that time, it was still really hot. There's no water. There's no toilets functioning. I mean, there's just nothing going on. And so he had to come back. And of course, we've seen the pictures of the devastation. I think the biggest problem is that some parts of Puerto Rico are still without power. This happened September something rather, right? And it's been like 6 weeks. I mean, I'm started, you know, I don't know about you, but I started thinking, what would I do without power or running water or a way to cook my food for 6 weeks? Am I prepared for, I mean, this is something that actually happened in a U.S. territory, right? I'm not talking about some third world country here. I'm talking about U.S. territory. And this happened. This is real. It's happening now. Am I prepared to survive the way these people are surviving? By the way, there's an article which I thought was interesting. It says, like, going back in time. People in Puerto Rico are having to go back to very primitive ways of living and surviving. And they're using their skills to do that. Do I have the skills to do that? You know, I'm kind of thinking to myself, what would I do? And they have some interesting stories in this article of what people are doing. In fact, here's a picture of a man, and I have his name right here. His name is Ramon. He's 79. He's living inside his brother's tool shed since Maria claimed his home. And he has a single light bulb, which is actually connected to a share generator donated by Luis Fonsi, which I don't even know who he is, but apparently he is famous because he's a Puerto Rican pop singer who filmed the video for the hit song Despacito. I didn't know much about that song, but apparently it's famous because it's like Song of the Year. But anyway, so here he is. People are clearing out their garbage themselves. Here's another oh, and by the way, they just basically cook by gathering branches of fallen trees and make fire. This lady is 92, Georgia Lopez, and she's been too scared to come out of her apartment this whole time. She's been in her apartment. She won't get out. She won't come out of her apartment because there's no street lights. And she's in a very notoriously crime-ridden development. So she won't leave the apartment. So her daughters bring her food. She hand washes her clothes. And when they bring her water or whatever, she just basically throws a rope over the side of her apartment building, and that's how she lifts, the water, packages, dry food, whatever it is that they give her, because she won't leave. That's how scared people are. And that's what people are doing. And I'm just thinking, so what would happen, what would happen? And in fact, I've been invited to Puerto Rico, as a matter of fact. I thought, because they called me last year, and I thought, they called me right before the hurricane, and I go, oh no, they want me to go to Puerto Rico. I would love to go, but how is it going to be if this hurricane is really bad? And it was really bad, so I'm thinking, I'm just not going to go to Puerto Rico. But then she called me like a couple of weeks ago, and she said, well, our church boards decided that, they want you to come in April. So I'm like, well, it just so happens that this church is a very wealthy church in Puerto Rico, and it's just so sad to see how the poor, it's always with these calamities, it's the poor people that suffer the most. They're the ones left out. They're the ones who have, no help. And that's what we've seen, and that's what I'm seeing in Puerto Rico. These calamities mostly affect the poor, not so much the rich. Speaking of the rich, there was an interesting article that I shared with my husband months ago. This was way before all these calamities happened. And there was an interview on NPR of a journalist who wrote an article on the New Yorker. And this is what NPR basically published. It says, why some Silicon Valley tech executives are bunkering down for doomsday. So here's the rich, the very rich, in fact. And it says this, it says, widespread fears about the future, including concerns about politics, the economy, the environment, and an all-out nuclear war, have led some people to prepare for ways to defend themselves. The survivalists are called. Some are from Silicon Valley executives. Some of these are Silicon Valley executives who worry about the tech future that they have helped to create. And that picture has a caption that says, a guard stands outside the Survival Condo Project, a site of an underground luxury apartment complex north of Wichita, Kansas. An underground, what did I say? Luxury apartment complex. So there's this journalist who investigated this, who's kind of like, what is this all about? So he went, he wrote, like I said, an article on the New Yorker, and he says this: they feel a sense of fragility in our politics. Our politics have become disorderly, and the tech survivalists look at it and think, well, we're not entirely sure that our institutions are as sound as we've always assumed they are. And so the article shows a few pictures of how it looks inside. So they have, this guy, his name is, by the way, Evan Osnos. You can look it up. You can find the article. In fact, you can probably read it. But Evan Osnos spent a night at this Survival Condo Project, a 20-unit luxury underground apartment complex north of Wichita, Kansas. The complex is designed to be self-sustaining with hydroponic vegetables, its own fish farm, and renewable energy sources. It has its own underground pool, as you can see there. And it says the project was developed by somebody named Larry Hall. And what he realized was that there was a certain kind of buyer out there who would be willing to spend, in this case, $3 million for an apartment underground, or $1.5 million for a half an apartment. And Larry Hall, the guy who built these, has sold every single unit except for the one he kept for himself. Something, right? It's something. And so the NPR lady, what's her name again? Terry Gross. She asked this journalist, he's like, so what kind of scenarios are the survivalists worried about? Like, what are these executives, very rich people, worried about that's going to happen? So he says, some of the things they talk about are the kind of stuff ordinary disasters, of ordinary disaster movies, but there's some real element to it. The idea that could be a pandemic, for instance, Ebola virus, for instance, had affected a much larger portion of the population. That could happen. Or an earthquake in the San Andreas Fault in San Francisco. That's not completely an unreasonable fear, right? Then he says, or the possibility of some civil unrest. They take what they've seen in some American cities and extrapolate onto the larger scale, and they said, well, what would happen if that, happened everywhere? And then there's another piece to it, which is specific to technology. That's interesting, right? And that is a fairly prevalent fear in this community. We're talking about Silicon Valley now, which is that the growth and the development of artificial intelligence, which has become a big subject of discussion, the idea that you'll soon have cars that have no drivers. You've seen those? Cars with no drivers. That this kind of fundamental change in the American labor force will continue to produce tensions, particularly between people who are losing their jobs and people who are responsible for the technology that is bringing about that change. You see what I'm talking about? So there's a tension, a social tension between the technology that's actually getting rid of jobs. Maybe fast food jobs, drivers, who knows? All these jobs are just disappearing, right? I mean, you go to Safeway and you can pay without going through a cashier, right? So that's what it's talking about. So Max Levchin, who was a co-founder of PayPal, where my husband used to work, and now is the CEO of a firm, he is opposed to this trend of survivalist thinking, but he is surrounded by it, and he says that what people worry about are the pitchforks. The pitchforks. And by that, he means the idea that the sort of tension that we saw with the Occupy movement a few years ago would take on a wider, more virulent form. Social unrest on a wide scale. That's what they're worrying about, and they're preparing for it. They're actually getting ready for what could happen. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was a millionaire, would I spend $3 million on an underground bunker? You know what I mean? In Kansas, out of all places? I don't know. But what I'm saying is there's some real feeling out there that things are going to get from bad to worse, maybe. And I think we as Christians can take a look at what's happening, not only with all these events that have happened, like natural disasters, there's some things also in the political environment, and I'm not going to get political here. I just want to point out, though, what's happening. A few months ago, I want to say maybe May of this year, Trump announced an end to the Johnson Amendment. Remember that? You know what the Johnson Amendment is all about? It's basically about not churches and other nonprofit organizations not having the choice to be political. Because they're nonprofit, they're tax-free, right? So they're not given the option to basically politicize because they're not supposed to. And Trump wants to get rid of the Johnson Amendment. Well, he can't get rid of the Johnson Amendment. Let's clear that up from the beginning, because it's a law, and the president doesn't really have the constitutional authority to get rid of laws. He would need Congress for that. But what he can do is write an executive order, which he could do any day, any time, and he could weaken the enforcement of a law. You see what I'm saying? He can basically direct the Treasury Department to be lenient. If you read this article, this is what they're saying. He could direct the Treasury Department to be lenient of any church with any church or any other organization that decides to break this amendment, which, by the way, was introduced by President Johnson before he was president. And so basically, he could do that. And it's happening. He's already done that. And some people are very happy with it. They want to see an erosion and a crumbling of the wall that separates church and state. Now, what is interesting to me also, as I was kind of reading up on this a little bit more, is that there's a whole movement out there, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but there's a whole movement of Christians out there who embrace the idea of dominionism. Has anybody ever heard of that term? Dominionism. And there's a few articles on it you can read. This was from a Seventh-day Adventist, in fact. It's religiousliberty.tv. And this was also published this year as well. And it's talking about the movement of dominionism. And what is dominionism? Dominionism is just basically a movement that believes that Christians should be political and should have political, social, and religious dominance in the world. And there's another very similar movement called the Christian Reconstructionism. So you can look them up when you go home. Dominionism and Christian Reconstructionism. And both of these streams of thought envision a world where Christians rule over the earth in a truly biblically based theocracy. And Reconstruction is a little bit of a variation of the theme, but it takes it to a little bit more of an extreme. And the Reconstructionists believe that someday Christians will set up a theocracy that will reinstate all the laws found in the biblical Old Testament. So that's a trend to kind of watch out for a little bit. But it goes beyond that, because when I was actually kind of reading up on dominionism, I found there is an actual version of it called Catholic integralism. Catholic integralism. I was like, what in the world is that? I had no idea. I had never heard it. And I actually came up on this article, which was actually printed on an Italian magazine that is published with the approval of the Vatican. And the magazine is called La Civiltà Cattolica. And they publish it in Italian, but they actually provide an English translation of at least this article. And it's talking about how, so you can read the title. It says evangelical fundamentalism and Catholic integralism, a surprising ecumenism. So basically, there's like this surprising sort of joining of forces between these two groups. And actually, this article is actually critical of it, because it says, and in fact, there's another article printed on or published by the National Catholic Reporter, who they're actually talking about that one article that was published in the Vatican. And they're basically saying, this is not the kind of ecumenism that the Pope embraces, because he says that this type of ecumenism is actually, they call it hate ecumenism. It's just more, it's different. It's not a peace ecumenism like the Pope is trying to bring about. And this guy talks about the tensions basically between these two types of movements in the Catholic Church right now. And it says the scholars have drawn parallels between Catholic integralism and a view held by a minority of the Reformed churches, basically Protestant churches, Christian Reconstructionism. And the author states that both the Catholic and the Reformed churches have created a non-traditional ecumenical alliance to achieve the goal of establishing a theocratic type of state. So that's definitely something that I think I'm going to be like kind of, watching out for, I guess, keeping my eyes open to, because I see it, I don't know about you, but I see it as a prophetic sort of thing that's happening. I don't know about you. So Pastor Tom last week said something that I thought was good. He said, this is not the end, it is the beginning. And he was, of course, talking about, there's verses in the Bible. There's, for instance, one in Mark 13, chapter 13, verse 8, that says, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of, do you know what it says? Of birth pains. So birth pains, right? It's the beginning of birth pains. Now, how do birth pains work? How many of you have experienced birth pains? Well, let me tell you what, when I was my first pregnancy, I would remember I was like 4 days before my due date, right? So 4 days, you're like any day now, anytime, any minute, right? Actually, the last 2 weeks before your due date, they tell you just any minute now, all right? So it was like 4 days before I was due, and I remember it was a Thursday night, and all of a sudden I feel a little pain, right? It's like, oh, it lasted for like 10 seconds. I was like, oh, what's that? I wonder if that's it. Could that be it? Right? Could this be it? And it goes away, and then nothing. 10 minutes later, though, ooh, there's another one. But I don't know how many of you, when you were pregnant, you women, read like all these books, how to get ready, right? What to expect when you're expecting. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but that one's a really famous one. So I read all the books and articles. You're not supposed to go to the doctor when your birth pains are coming every 10 minutes, right? I don't know how many of you remember. You're supposed to wait until they're like, I don't remember, 3 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart, something like that. You're supposed to wait until they're very close. So this was like 10 minutes. They weren't all that bad. So I'm thinking, okay, it's the beginning, but it's not yet, right? So I better just go to bed and just try to sleep. You think I could sleep? I was just pacing around, the living room. And the pains were coming. They just weren't all that strong, and they weren't all that frequent. And I just couldn't go to sleep, though, because I was like, it could happen. It could be, 2 hours from now. Who knows? I couldn't go to sleep. The next morning, I was so tired. I'm just trying to pace around. What am I going to do? Walk around the building, whatever. Finally, by 2 p.m., I'm thinking, okay, they're like 5 minutes apart. And they're, strong. They're coming on strong now. I should go to the doctor. I didn't even go to the ER. I went to the doctor first. And the doctor, you know how they check, and they could figure out how dilated you are? The doctor's like, it's like 2 centimeters. Go home. I was like, you gotta be kidding. So we go for walks, because they tell you, go to the park. You go for a walk. Sometimes that helps to accelerate the labor. So we went for a walk. I went home, did my laundry, washed dishes, vacuumed, all kinds of stuff. By 8 p.m., I'm thinking, okay, they're coming like every 3 or 4 minutes. I should go to the hospital, because by then it was too late to go to the doctor's office, so I went straight to the hospital. They checked me, and they're like, you're like barely 3 centimeters. I was like, you kidding? It's been like 24 hours almost. Well, okay, we're going to take you in, admit you, and we're just going to be monitoring you, because it's probably going to, it's 3 centimeters, it's probably going to happen, soon. I mean, the baby's going to come, right? It's not going to stay in there forever, even though it's delayed, right? It's taking longer than we thought, but it's going to come, right? So here I am, admitted, they're waiting, and I'm like, it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It's barely happening. It's going so slow. And so they go, do you want us to give you a medication to induce your labor? And I thought, sure. I'm like, this has been like 27 hours, whatever. Right by now, I'm like, yes, I want the baby out. So they give me this, medicine to induce labor. Oh, that was the worst. The labor pains after that are so bad after. They're just strong. I don't know. That was my experience anyway. Every woman's experience is different. Every pregnancy is different, but mine was just painful. And they just, waited and waited and waited, and just very slow. Finally, the baby came at 5:16 in the morning, Saturday morning. So I had started Thursday night. It was finally Saturday at 5:16 a.m. that Jessica was born. That was 36 hours of hard labor that I had to endure. But the point is, you know how it goes, right? How labor pains go. They start off slow, kind of not too hard, not too painful. As time goes by, there's two things that increase, which are what? Intensity and frequency. So that's how labor pains work. And so I think we've been told that labor pain, that these signs of the times would be like labor pains, so that we would know what to look out for, right? So the two things we are to look out for are that they're going to get more frequent and they're going to get more intense. So are we ready for that kind of scenario where these things are happening more and more frequently? So by the way, I also saw another article on the internet about how Puerto Ricans are coping, you know. And so it was an article called, I don't know if I have the name of it, but it was something like 5 creative ways in which Puerto Ricans are learning to cope with primitive circumstances. Basically, that's kind of what they're having to do. So the number one is that they're collecting water from creeks, and they're using these pipes and piping the water to their homes. They're using these very primitive filtration systems. I like number 3 and 4, though. This is their shower. That's how you shower when you have no running water through your pipes, right? Put it in a bucket. And I put it up in the wall. In that video over there, I won't show you the video, but it's basically this guy who made this washing machine. I showed it to my husband. It's just a big bucket, and it has this lever, wood lever that the guy made. And so it just goes up. He's sitting, I don't know if you can see his foot right there. He's actually sitting on a chair and actually lifting this wood thing up and down. And so then there's this arm attached to the lever that just goes, and it washes the clothes for the lady. And the lady's just going, "Can you believe, you ladies, my husband? Look what he did for me. I was washing by hand, and look what a loving husband I have." So that's so sweet. He figured out a way to help her lady, you know, basically wash her clothes in more primitive circumstances. So I thought that was cute. But what have we been really told to do? I think you're all familiar. We as Seventh-day Adventists have been given a message about getting ready, haven't we not? We have. In fact, for over 100 years, we have been told to try to live in the country if possible, because that way we can basically feed ourselves, be more self-reliant, try to grow our own food. So why is that? There's a passage in Revelation 13:17. It's talking about end times, of course. Revelation 13, we know the beast and the second beast and all these other things, and the mark of the beast. And it says right there, "And no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." So what is this talking about? It's basically talking about a period of time coming in the future. We don't know when. It could be next year, it could be 10 years, 20, we just don't know when. But there will be a time, and of course we would know that it's coming because the labor pains are getting more frequent and more intense. But there will be a time coming in the future when, unless you have the mark of the beast, you won't be able to buy or sell. And so all these things happening, these earthquakes and hurricanes, I bought a book by a man who I respect very, very much. My uncle used to be his friend. His name is Jim Buehler. He's been here to this church. And I'm totally taking this from his book, but I'm quoting him and giving him credit. And this is a timeline that he has. I'm not going to go through his too much stuff. I just wanted you to look at the bottom part of it, just the bottom line. It says, increasing wars and disasters. Wouldn't you say that's now? Increasing wars and disasters. And then there's a line right there that says, flee the cities, which could be now too. We could be doing that right now. But then after that, there's a period of time when no buy or sell, it says right there, no buy or sell, and we would have to be able to raise our own provisions. Now, a lot of people say, that a lot of people quote a quote from Ellen G. White that actually contradicts this a little bit, because she wrote in early writings, page 56. She says, "The Lord has shown me repeatedly that it is contrary to the Bible to make any provision for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. I saw that the saints had food laid up by them or in the field at the time of trouble, when swords, famines, and pestilence are in the land, it would be taken from them by violent hands, and strangers would reap their fields. Then will be the time for us to trust wholly in God, and He will sustain us. I saw that our bread and water will be sure at that time, and that we shall not lack or suffer hunger, for God is able to spread the table for us in the wilderness. If necessary, He would send ravens to feed us, as He did feed Elijah, or rain manna from heaven, as He did for the Israelites." Right? So God is going to provide for us, but it says right here, in the wilderness. And what Jim Buehler and others are saying, there will be a time before that death decree. Do you see that? Before the death decree, where we are to flee at that death decree, we are to flee to more solitary places. And then we will have to survive on our own, and we won't be able to survive on our own unless God helps us out. But before that, during that time of no buy or sell, then is when we're going to need to kind of feed ourselves. And so we've been told for a long, long, long time to be prepared. In fact, I have a passage, and I wanted to read the whole passage, and I forgot to bring the Bible. But here's one Bible I could see right here. Oh, great. I can't even read it. But it's in 1 Thessalonians, and if you want to go with me to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and it's verse, well, I wanted to start from verse 2, in fact. So 1 Thessalonians 5, oh, you're so sweet. Yes, awesome. Okay, it says, yeah, awesome, thank you. "For you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a what? Thief in the night." How does the thief in the night come? Unexpectedly. All right, so are we going to know when it happens or not then? Okay, well, while they're saying peace and safety, then what? Destruction will come upon them, what? Suddenly. Like what? Suddenly, like labor pains. Interesting. Upon a woman with a child. And they will not escape. But, here's a but. What does that mean? Wait a minute. Something, you got to pay attention to this. "But you, brethren, are not what? Are not what? In darkness, that the day would overtake you as a thief." It will overtake the world, but you are not in darkness. Right? Isn't that awesome? Praise God for that. And then it says, "For you are all sons of light and sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. So then let us not," what now? "Sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober." In other words, we have been given this message for our own good. Because when it happens, if we are not ready, we might suffer the consequences of not being ready. So God is being so gracious to us, telling us ahead of time to prepare. Kind of like, thank you so much. That was really helpful. That was very, very helpful. Thank you. So basically, God is telling us, so there's 3 things that I see that God is telling us. Move to the country. If you can, as soon as possible, try to figure out a way. Because, it will take years for us to really, my husband and I have been living in this new house for a year, and we're still not quite, like, eating out of, all our food from the garden. Any of you get all your food from your garden? That takes quite a bit of preparation, effort, work. It could take years. So the sooner the better. And the second thing is, of course, to grow your own food if you can. And then you know what? It's not just because we're not going to be able to buy and sell. There's so many other reasons nowadays. All these chemicals, GMOs, pesticides. There's so many reasons why growing your own food is a great idea. And people outside of our church know this. A lot of more and more and more people are growing their own food. But this takes time. You don't learn it in, oh, okay, by when we have to flee, then I'll learn how to grow my food. Too late by then. And the third thing that I think that we could learn is a little bit of wilderness survival techniques. Because, sure, God will feed us, but you know what? God didn't build the ark for Noah. He told him to build it himself, and he used the ark to save his life, but he didn't build it for him. We are to also take part in this preparation, I think, and if we learn how to sort of survive in the wilderness, I think we'll be much better off. So there's a post from Jim Buehler from the other day that actually copied. I told you, Pam, that I had a little thing for you because, look, your name is up on the screen. Do you see it? You liked it too. It's on Facebook. Anyway, I like what he said. He said, all those who are planning to hop on the ark at the last minute were 7 days too late. Good one, right? You liked it. Did you like it? Yeah, because you clicked on it. So you must have liked it. So I think he's right. I bought this book on Amazon just like this week. And it's 99 cents. There's two versions, a long version and a short version. The short version is 99 cents. It's like a Kindle book. And it's called Another Ark to Build. It was written many years ago by Elder Frazee. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Is it Frazee? Anyway, he talks about another ark to build. And what I like about this book is that he says, you know what? It's not just for ourselves we're doing this. It's not just for ourselves. Because, there's a lot of people out there. There's the survivalists. There's the preppers. Have you ever heard of preppers? They're hoarding food, guns, everything for themselves. Just, I want to survive whatever it is that's happening, right? That's the mentality. Whatever thing that's going to happen, I want to survive it, so I'm hoarding all this food. But he says something different. He says we're not doing this for ourselves. Each one of our homes could become a refuge. A refuge. Not just for us. It's for us to share with people who are needing to feed themselves, who are wanting to learn, who need help and assistance teaching, for us to give, not just to take in for ourselves. I love that concept, so I highly recommend that little booklet you can find on Amazon for 99 cents. So it's not about us hoarding, it's about building a refuge. Isn't that beautiful? And so to end, I just want to leave you with this one verse from Amos 3:7. And it says, surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. He has told us ahead of time. He has given us prophecy so that we know what will be happening. Maybe not exactly when, because the time and the hour no one knows except for the Father. And it could be, years, it could be decades, or it could be months, weeks. We don't know. The point is not when. The point is to be ready for it, no matter when. I think God is trying to wake up his people with all the things that happened this year, with the earthquakes, the fires, the hurricanes, the shootings. God is saying, wake up. This is just a little sample. Look at what happened in Puerto Rico. Would you be able to survive that? Would you be able to survive 5 weeks without power? Would you be able to survive 5 months without power? Are we ready? I think God is trying to wake us up. And not to say we are going to, like I said, going to be a prepper. But we are to continue to do the things Jesus did. To preach like Noah did. As he was building the ark, he was warning the world of what was to come. So we are also to build our ark, warn the world also at the same time, and do what Jesus did to bring healing through our health message. We are still to do that. But also, as we do those things, prepare. Build our ark. Build a refuge that God has been telling us for so long to do. So that is my prayer for me and for you this morning, that maybe the Holy Spirit will talk to us and that we will start thinking in terms of, okay, if this is happening, what am I going to do to prepare for it? So have a wonderful, happy Sabbath, and I think we have a ending song for you. So God bless you and have a very, very happy Sabbath day.
Let's close our service today by singing hymn number 604, We Know Not the Hour. Join